Hey, that's a deal.
Nice.
Yeah. Turns out when you have friends who get access to the Disney Friends and Family store or the company store
Ooh.
with a Friends and Family discount, things get real cheap.
Wow. Hey,
Yeah.
nice.
Well, that's hopefully they'll stay cheap with these tariffs.
Oh, boy.
Wait,
Not yet.
too soon.
Yeah,
A
too
little
soon.
early. I thought we were talking about the year of Linux again.
Yeah.
It is
Well,
the year of Linux.
welcome. We're live here on the internet. We're here with the show.
And I'm live in person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Look at me.
It's really weird.
Will and I
Elena's
have flipped.
here, and Steve's on the line.
I was going to joke that I've never met Elena in person. That like she could just be a construct, but I have seen you in person now. So.
Yeah.
She's our AI.
Well, when we last saw each other was at Gordon's celebration of life,
Mm-hmm.
and the thing I kept saying all afternoon was, "Wow, how are you all so tall?" So I used to see everybody just sitting in a chair, and all of a sudden I'm looking up at Will. I'm like, "Hey, you're really tall."
Well, that was when Brad refuted it by stating his exact height down to the quarter of an inch.
Yeah. It's funny.
He knows measurement really well.
I was talking to a game studio the other day, and they just had their first offsite since they hired a bunch of people, and they ran a pool for the new people because it's a virtual team, and they ran a pool for how tall do you think everybody is for all the new people.
That's funny.
And like they gave a prize to the person who got the most people right, which was
Nice.
funny.
Wow.
That's cute.
All right. Well, you know what else is cute is Linux. I've heard it's got a little penguin.
Yeah.
It's so cute, right? I was
Yeah.
telling Will during the pre-show. Oh, you know what? I'm gonna stop. I need my fidget item. Oh, yeah, I've got this. This is my fidget item. So I was telling Will in the pre-show that I think I'm finally gonna do it. I think it's finally the year of Linux.
You've had it with Windows, huh?
Well, no, I mean, like I'm hoping to wait for SteamOS because if I can put that like on a gaming laptop, that's where I really want to try it. But in the meantime, I thought I might as well dip my toes back into it. Not that I'm not. I've used Linux before, but yeah, not as a daily driver.
But
so.
what distro?
Well, so I remember. Do you remember the Ryzen 7000 launch in Texas, Austin?
I do.
Yeah. So we did a video with one Wendell, level 1 Tex Wendell, about Linux, and Wendell was trying to convince Gordon to pick up Linux. He always said he would, and he never did. Unfortunately, it's almost like he wasn't really invested in it.
What? Say it ain't so.
But so Wendell said Pop OS. That Pop
Okay.
would be the one that he thinks that Gordon should try. So I
It's
don't know.
But that's because it's the easiest transition from Windows, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you should get right in there and go all the way and get like Debian. just
Compile your own kernel.
yeah. Get Gentoo it up. What's the There's a new super sweaty one that like even the Arch people look at and are like, oh, this is too much.
Sweaty Linux is my favorite. Yes, the
It's,
sweaty distro.
God, what's it called? I got to look it up. Hold on.
While you're looking up, I will say the one that I've had the most experience with is Kali, because of my white hat friend Mikey. So yeah, he showed me how to install it on a laptop and mess around with some fun toys. But I never use it as a daily driver. And then obviously, I guess the Steam Deck is really the one I've used.
I really
want
want to do SteamOS testing once they bring it to desktop. I mean, I know we could do Linux testing already, obviously, but it just that seems like it's going to open the door for a lot of people. It's very accessible in theory. So,
Well, yeah, I mean, Elena, you famously on the show went on a Linux rant. So are you willing to give it another try if we all get into Linux and we
Look,
make this?
I'm not against learning it. I am just saying that the evangelists for it could
They're
take-
sweaty.
they could use some maybe PR coaching. That's all I'm saying.
Yes, yes, definitely. Well, I mean, and which I don't remember. Which one did you use? Do you remember?
I mean, I've tried. Was it Mint? I've tried. I mean, obviously the Raspberry Pi distro is based off Debian. I think. I think those are the main two that I've sampled. They're not bad. They're just not Windows. So there's just a lot of things that So I complain about this in Windows 11 too. So I'm consistent, right? Where it's like if you change things on me or if I have a system for doing things and you break that system, I get very cranky because I just want to get through things efficiently.
Yeah.
And so Linux is like one big breaking of all my processes. So it makes me cranky.
Yeah.
Get a little grouchy.
Yeah. Well, then, Steve, Linux testing when? Come on.
Yeah. I do think SteamOS would be easy for us to integrate because we already have a process for that from the Steam Deck. So it shouldn't be too difficult. The frame time pacing is really good in SteamOS. I don't know if that's universally true in Linux, but like the lows are good and the frame-to-frame consistency is good. So definitely want to do it, but we're just waiting on Valve, I think, which is maybe it's going to be the meme where I'm just like a skeleton. Yeah, waiting for Valve.
Just keep waiting.
Half-Life 3 just around the corner, guys. Just keep waiting. They're working on it.
I was going to say,
okay?
we're going to take an over-under which one comes out first.
Oh, God. Well, friend of the show.
Did you cover Half-Life? Sorry, when it was new? Well,
I was not working in the industry when Half-Life 1 came out, but I did go when Half-Life 2, like Valve invited Maximum PC to come up, and Josh Norm and I got on a plane and flew up to Bellevue and sat in a poorly lit like an office with 2 desks and 2 kind of nice but real bare bones looking PCs even for the time. And we played Half-Life 2 for 2 straight days to hammer through it. Midway through the second day, they called us. They came in and were like, "Hey, do you guys need?" They just dump food in every once in a while, and they were like, "Hey, we're about to push the button that makes the game gold upstairs. Do you want to come up and see?" And we were like, "No, we got to keep playing. We're not going to get done in time. The flight's in like 4 hours." And it is one of the great professional regrets of my life is that I was not in the room when Half-Life 2 went gold because I was a doofus and stayed downstairs for the 20 minutes that would have taken.
no.
Wasn't there a Half-Life related thing on Alcatraz? Gordon always said something about.
So that was the Radeon, I think 97 or 9800 launch. AMD had partnered with Valve, and Half-Life was supposed to come out. So they brought all the press and all these OEM partners and everybody to Alcatraz at night. And everybody went to it because it was kind of hard to go to Alcatraz at night then. You had to get a special ticket to do it, and they only did it a few times a year. And so we all got it. Like we got on the ferry to go out there, and it was like it was a huge event. We got there. Gabe showed up, talked for about 5 minutes. They put him back on a boat as soon as he left. There were no interviews or anything with anybody because they had just found out that they had been hacked, and they were going to have to delay Half-Life because they had that source leak. And so the deal with the Radeon was you were going to get Half-Life 2 in the box, which was a big deal. Because it was also like you have to remember this was also around the launch of Steam. Like they had rolled out Steam for Condition Zero and a couple other things beforehand, but for the most part, this was the first big like AAA equivalent Steam release. And so Gordon and his wife came out like press people that didn't normally go to Games Event went to this because it was at a weird place, and Gabe Newell was going to be there talking about Half-Life and Valve stuff. And then like 2 days later, they announced that they were delaying the whole thing indefinitely because of this breach. And people like it was and your inbox copy of Half-Life 2 probably didn't get played on that 9800 or 9700 or whatever it was as a result.
Whoops.
Oh man.
Nice. Well, I have one more question while we're in the pre-show. This is just for Steve. I opened up my inbox this morning, and I got an email from Patreon saying there's updates to GamersNexus's cooler bench overhaul and moving to X3D. First question is, who wrote this?
I wrote it with Ben.
Oh, okay, because there's no byline on here. You know, it'd be nice if there was like a little message like heart. Steve and Ben, at the end.
I don't always sign those. We put that together. We put that together while traveling for the Tariffs thing. He and I intersected at an airport, and very slammed for time. And so he walked next to me while we were rushing to the next flight and was furiously taking notes on his phone for what the update would say.
It's like, transcribe this for me. Okay.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, we were slammed for that video. So
yeah. Well, no, I mean it. I'm interested to hear more overhaul testing.
Yeah.
When was the last time you overhauled that CPU?
Cooler testing. Yeah, the the last big one we did at this scale would have been AM4. So it's probably like 2018 or 19, probably 2019 was the last like huge overhaul. Then we had a mid step with the 14900K and the 12900KS, which I was never really that committed to because the 14900K sucks. So it was just.
I don't know. I just read something that it's selling better than Arrow Lake. So.
Well, that's sad.
Look, man, if you want to get the fastest CPU for video card testing, it's well, I guess until the 9800X3D came out. 14900K was it, baby.
It was, yeah. We just used it for the heat load. So yeah, moving to AM5 is cool. I mean, I find it's a lot easier to control the platform than Intel and keep all the voltages as fixed as I want them. So also just most of the recommendations that we have now for gaming PCs are X3D CPUs, so it's better to represent those. Are
you doing AIOs and air cooler there, or just the whole thing?
Yeah, both. That's the challenge though, right? Is like you want because if the heat's too low, then all the coolers look the same. And if it's too high, obviously you chop off the low end because they can't cool it. And so the balance is always like, what's the perfect amount of heat where we can still represent differences, but but we're also allowing the low end single tower, single fan coolers to perform.
Well, and you don't want to have to do like 140 watt testing and 70 watt testing and 200 watt testing and like that, right? Because that's the other way to do that, I guess.
Yeah, we do. Currently, we do like 150 and 250, and that seems to cover pretty much the whole span. To do 2 heat loads with the amount of like test mounts and passes and everything we do. Currently, a cooler review takes about 40 hours of testing, so it's roughly one full. Like we've dialed it in so that's roughly one full week for somebody. So adding another heat load, now you're 50, 60 hours. So
that's a lot.
Yeah.
And how do you have you thought about just putting like a hot plate on it? Like just not doing a CPU?
We have, we built one. It was really cool. Like had it custom engineered by a company in Taiwan. The problem is the IHS curvature. So like, I mean, I guess we could represent that too, but I was always it would be much faster, but I worry about being able to communicate the results in a real world way for people.
Yeah.
So you could miss something.
It was almost too even, like too perfectly even. Interesting.
Yeah. You'd have to get in there and really screw it up if you wanted to represent an Intel IHS.
Nice. Well, okay. We'll see. Maybe it's going to be updated for the next socket. We'll see.
It might.
Anyway, we're not here to talk about sockets or testing or anything like that. We're here to talk about tariffs. Everybody's favorite topic. So
economics.
Yeah. Get your rulers out. No, your math books.
Supply and
your
demand.
Calculator. We're going to go through formulas.
Back to school.
Yeah. Percentage differences.
You got your protractor? I got a protractor here.
I just
Protractors are good.
I just have my Copilot key on this laptop. I just hit that.
Oh no.
Yeah. That's all I do.
Don't we have a calculator that plays Snake back in the days?
I can write a program that'll play Snake for you all day long.
He did.
Yeah,
he did show me.
I'm learning Python.
Yeah,
it's exciting.
Okay, then I think we're ready. How's the hamsters over there, Willis?
Hamsters are running. I'm running.
Yeah, you're back.
I'm back. I'm full bionic now, so from head to toe since the
upgrade.
So yeah, upgrade and all that. So yeah, everything's running well. Let's get on with the show.
Nice.
You ready, Adam?
All right. Yeah. I think so. Yeah. Here we go. I'm ready. This is gonna be easy. I didn't even need to write it down. You ready?
Oh no, here we go again.
Yeah. That's fine. I got it. In this episode of The Full Nerd, Steve from GamersNexus talks tariffs. Fortunately, Will is on the screen. I pointed to Will.
Will can stand in for me.
Yeah.
Well, if you can just take all my
And welcome everyone to episode 345 of the Full Nerd PC World's podcast about the coolest hot takes of PC hardware. I am your fill-in host, Adam Patrick Murray, but I'm not alone. We've kind of shuffled things around a little bit, so I'm gonna go in an opposite direction. Here at the table with me, in the flesh, right next to these GamersNexus dice, is Elena Yee. Hello, Elena.
Hello.
Yeah. Why are you here?
I am at a conference this week that's nearby the office, so
Nice.
I ran over here.
Yeah. Cool stuff. I'm glad you're here. Glad to have you here.
I've been wanting to get to see these die in
You watch
person.
out. They're very sharp.
That seems
He did
appropriate.
not making them child friendly.
You know what? That seems appropriate. Sometimes we have to learn things the hard way in life.
Exactly. Speaking of learning the hard way, Will Smith is live from the internet. Hello, Will.
I'm in the machine.
We put
Hi,
you back in
hello.
the box. Yeah.
Will
Yeah, I know. Get
Yeah.
in my hole.
Yeah, get back in there. But you know who I needed to come on the show? I just needed to. It was one Steve from GamersNexus. Hello, Steve.
Hello. How's it going?
Yeah. Thank you for joining us. We're going to talk about some fun stuff real quick, though. I do need to mention Willis Lai is back on the verticals and horizontals. He's back, baby.
Hello, everyone. Happy Tuesday. I'm finally back. You know, my doctor wouldn't allow me to have 2 weeks off. And he said, you know what? Adam needs, someone to help be
Yeah.
on the, verticals and horizontals. So doctors just sent me back, basically.
Yeah. You got to get back in there. We're gonna hop right into it because there's a lot to talk about here. First off, I think we should all take a moment and shower Steve with praise for his amazing documentary about tariffs that went up last
He's
week.
trying
Yeah.
to get him to blush on camera. That's just mean.
I mean, I've seen other people express this. I will express this myself. That was one of the best pieces of documentary journalism that I've seen. Really good job for not just you, the full crew, that you got going over there, but yeah, that was a lot of good reporting, a lot of good stuff. It was a really good piece. So yeah, Elena, your turn to shower.
Oh yeah, okay. So you know what? As things go, this is the cleanest shower you're gonna get, probably. I did some of my own work trying to figure out the tariffs, earlier in the year, and I mean, for one, it is incredibly in-depth piece. If you haven't watched it in full, you should definitely make time for all 3 hours of it, and don't try to go at 2x speed. Like, really sit there and listen to it, because there's a lot of really rich information that Steve got, and I think for me that was one of the most impressive things about it. Was that you got so many people to talk so transparently. And I want to dive into this later on in the conversation, because to me that is also a signal of where we're at with all of this.
Yeah.
Because normally they are so, just even 2 months ago, they were so much more reticent to talk details, and they would talk to me about it, but they would tell me you can't publish this, or you have to generalize that, we don't want to go on record as being identified, things like that. And then for people to actually stand up and be seen on video saying these things and showing you the spreadsheets, that was incredible.
Yeah, they were definitely, I think, like you said, I mean,
Steve,
people
hold
are
on.
hitting,
We're not done showering you with praise.
Yeah, Will, your
I
turn.
was trying to stop it.
Actually, one Brad Charkis is in the chat. He said Steve's video made me say, "quote shit, I wish we ran that," end quote, which I don't say very often. Definitely go watch it if you haven't.
Thanks,
all right,
Brad.
Will, your turn.
Yeah, I just wanted to plus one what Elena said. I think at one point you got the folks from iBuyPower and CyberPower to sit
that
down
too.
together.
Yeah.
Which was like there were multiple moments where I was like, wow, people, the meta conversation is that people are worried, upset, angry. Vendors are worried, upset, angry at what this is doing to their businesses, as evidenced by the fact that people that normally don't have professional relationships with each other other than as absolutely brutal competitors,
Right.
But they have respect for each other's work, but they're not going to barbecues at each other's house on the weekend.
So we assume.
We're sitting down and sharing the innate intimate details of their businesses. The folks from Height were like, hey, here's how much money we make on every single case that we sell in the best of times, and here's what tariffs do to us, and at the same time, they were willing to chuck retailers, take a shot at retailers, which is another thing that these folks never do.
Oh, I know, right? Yeah.
Because they were like, look, the retailers are benefiting from. We'll get to it.
Yeah.
We'll get to all that. But it was
get
an
to it.
incredible video. It's the longest video I've watched that wasn't about the Galactic Star Cruiser this year.
High praise.
Yeah. Well, which one was better?
I like Steve's better. It was absolutely amazing.
There you go.
I can't go to the Disney killed the Star Cruiser before tariffs. So
Dang it, that sucks.
Before I forget too, I want to do a shout out to your video editing team, because I thought the way that was pieced together was incredibly well done as well. Just really smart cuts and the pacing of it.
Yeah, they went through and we had like I think it was over 8 hours of footage, and so the challenge became we had I had all these different ideas of how we could piece it together, and it ultimately was like this story's changing too fast. We got to pick something we can get done, now. And so the whole behind the scenes process was basically they went through Premiere. Everyone had one section. They labeled the topics. They color coded them based on what they thought was good. And then I'd go through and do a pass, and we'd cut it down basically. So yeah, it was a challenge. I think everyone at some point who's an editor worked on it. So it'd be 3 or 4 people worked on the pre-cut.
Nice.
Wow.
Well,
yeah.
Well, once again, thank you for coming on the show. We're really glad to have you here. Really appreciate it. I know you're a busy man, so we won't take up too much of your time. But I want to start off. I guess my first question is, why did you feel like you wanted to tackle this? This is definitely a big topic. There's a lot to get through. So why was it important that you did it?
I thought it was going to be, why did you do the tariffs?
Yeah. Well,
Why did
that
you
too. That's the
personally?
second
Yeah.
one. Yeah.
I don't know. I think it's just like it was when we started working on it. It was the nonstop conversation with every hardware manufacturer. It didn't matter what country they were based in or made their stuff in, and we were starting to get notices about price changes for consumers. And so to me, it was important to try and understand what level of this could be smoke screening, what level of it is actually like sort of quote unquote necessary. And so that's what we wanted to learn about. But it's interesting because it's way outside of what we normally do, obviously. And so the approach was, I was thinking of Gordon a lot for this one, but the approach was ask questions and then shut up, and one of the part where I was thinking of Gordon was I specifically for everyone threw in a find me a positive, right? Like for people who don't like it, try to I don't care if you have to reach, like try to figure out what could a positive be for the way these are being rolled out. And that was my devil's advocate, question. So
Devil's
that was kinda
avocado,
interesting.
actually.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Would,
You don't want to taste the devil's avocado.
were there I don't want to talk about this in a way that makes people think they shouldn't go watch the video, because like going and watching the video is eminently worth watching.
Yes.
And we're not going to cover anywhere near the whole stuff there, but like, were there commonalities? You one of the questions you asked, I think everybody I saw it come up again and again, was what are the misconceptions people have? And it seemed like a lot of people felt like customers and people who buy components from them don't really understand how this works.
Yeah. Yeah. The number one misconception that manufacturers felt like were out in the wild is definitely, I would say it was like 2 parts. It was one, they felt people don't necessarily know who pays for it. And the second one is how much. And so if it's a 25% increase in the tariff or whatever, that doesn't necessarily mean it's a linear 1-to-1 increase in the product price. It could be more or it could be less. And the way where it could be more that I thought was really interesting talking to iWiPower was if you have to reduce your order volume because you're not liquid enough, right, to sustain these higher import taxes on short notice. So you reduce your order volume, that affects your pricing, and then that is what the tariff is calculated against now. And that it kind of creates that ripple, right? And then if they're on credit, you have another consideration that compounds. So that could be on the higher side where it's not linear. And then on the lower side, it might just be that they're eating some of the hard tariff cost to try and compete, as other people are raising their prices. So yeah, super deep, intricate.
I want to tease out that one little bit about the credit and liquidity, because I feel like that's one thing that doesn't really get discussed a lot, because I don't think most consumers don't really think about how businesses run, right? And I think a lot of them assume that you make profit, then you take that money and you reinvest it. But what's happening a lot of times that I think that got brought up in the discussion is that a lot of times these companies are going to banks still and borrowing money, so that way they can be, I think, assured of a steady cash flow, so they're not, suddenly caught off guard. And right now, interest rates, like they're not dropping. I think I forgot what the Fed said about what they're going to be doing with interest rates. So they're also kind of facing it from both ends, right? Because if we were in a period where interest rates were lower, then borrowing the money maybe would be more feasible. But because if the interest rates are higher, that probably also is going to limit how much they can extend themselves if they want to try to make up for gaps or absorb costs, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and a lot of the money moves on like net 60 or net 90 and kind of the, not as good cases. And so you've got these latencies to money movement. And one of the things I was talking to a company about is right now, so most of the companies in the space do not own their own factories. It's contract manufacturing, regardless of the country it's in. And one of the companies I was just talking to was saying that they're worried about it's a case of cooler manufacturer placing more orders at the moment with some of the factories because with order volume going down at those factories, there's now a concern of will this factory stay solvent? And if they don't, and we pay for an order, what happens to our money? And so it creates this kind of shockwave of, whatever you think of the tariffs, good, bad, doesn't matter. Like from a consumer standpoint, the shockwave is there's going to be an interruption of supply of various products to the market, and so then what does that do for you as the end user, right? It might just be as simple as the thing you want isn't there to buy. It could also affect pricing, of course, but I thought that was interesting. I hadn't really considered that.
And it limits choice too, right? So, one of the things that was discussed in your video and other places is that you might go from having, right now up until this point, we've, I think, been spoiled in, as PC builders because we've had more and more choices, a lot more even niche choices or options become available to us. And now, if companies can't afford to do that, we might start seeing it trend back towards any color's fine as long as that color's black.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say that.
Yeah. Things like that. Or like any size is fine as long as you like a standard mid tower. Things like that might become a little bit. Choice might become more constrained again because companies can't afford to go out on a limb and do a smaller run of things to make a certain population happy that they were served.
No, that was a really good point. I think Rob Teller is the one who brought that up in the video. And I can give a real example of that where for any of our products, so we have a few things that we use suppliers that make them in the US, then we have a lot that we make overseas. And it doesn't matter what the origin is. You have an MOQ or minimum order quantity, and then you also have economies of scale where the more you buy, the more you save, as Jensen Huang has stated.
It is true, but
so in this situation, there is some truth to that, and as much as I really hate to say it, but
well, you heard it here first. Steve from GamersNexus says the more you buy, the more you save is true.
That's right. Yeah, Steve says Jensen was right. Yeah. So, but as an example, for our solder mats, so we do like blue and a couple of other colors, and blue's the highest volume. And so when we place an order for X many units, the price breaks we get per unit are based on that color. So if I order more blue than red, my price for blue is better, than it is for red. Red, it might be a couple dollars more per unit or whatever. And so you get into the PC building world, it's the same thing where a red case that sells, so Height gave me these numbers years ago, but like black is the vast majority of the market share, then it's white, and then something like red, you're maybe 5% or less. And that just might not really be feasible if you're already becoming cash constrained or volume constrained. So
to step back real quick, I do wonder, like, how was the process of reaching out to these companies? Did you actually talk to more companies that weren't willing to get on video? Like,
yeah, the process was pretty simple. Fortunately, being in the industry a long time, you start to kind of get to know people who, even though we're very critical of the things their company makes, like there's certain people who understand where that's coming from. They'll still talk to us. And so I just called those people. But Other companies, yeah, I mean, I'm happy to name them like Intel, Nvidia, and AMD. I asked all three of them if they wanted to say anything, and we could surmise by the fact that they were not in the video that they did not want to say anything. So, Nvidia did give us a statement in the 5060 Ti announcement about tariff impact, and we shared that. And I think they might have been. I was getting the indication they may have been willing to say that again on camera for this video. And then there were some developments in the tariffs timeline, and they're such a big company. I think it was just like, nope, we don't want to touch it.
Well,
So.
I was gonna say, and they have, because they're publicly traded. Like, I was surprised you got to talk to Corsair because it's a publicly traded company too, and because the statements that they make on this stuff can have an impact on their stuff. There's all sorts of weird laws and requirements theoretically around that stuff. I mean, who knows what's going on there these days? But
Right.
like, did you notice a difference? So what's the scope? Like what's the size of the companies? Corsair was the biggest company you talked to, I think, probably.
Yeah, because they're in the, well, I don't know about this year, but they have been in the billions, right, for revenue.
Yeah. And then the smallest was the screwdriver shop in Austin, probably, or the repair shop in Austin, probably.
Probably Louis Rossman's repair shop was the smallest, I would think. And then after him,
Maybe the Canadian guy, the
probably
Yeah.
probably Protocase. Yeah.
Protocase, yeah.
Yeah. So like, but you're talking about like thousands of people employees all the way down to dozens of people employees. And were there differences between their approaches to this and like how they feel like they're going to weather it that you noticed that you
Yeah,
called
no,
out?
that's a really good question. Yeah, Lewis, I don't know exactly how many employees he has. I'm fairly certain it's below 10.
Okay.
So he would be like very I'm so happy we had him on because he's really the only representative we had for like a true small business as you think of it in the US, which is like a large part of the workforce. And yeah, I'd say the biggest difference is a company like Corsair, they can say, well, we've got all these different strings we can pull, and we can pressure this supplier to eat some of the cost and their supplier to eat some of the cost, and we'll all absorb some of it together. And then maybe they still increase the price the same amount or whatever, but they have more leverage, right? And so I think, especially when they're probably the largest customer for a lot of these factories, it's just the threat of losing that customer it gives them a lot of power.
Yeah.
Whether or not they pass that power along to savings for the consumer, I don't know. That's kind of that's difficult to really.
Well,
Yeah,
I assume they also have fewer credit problems too if they're a big giant publicly traded company, right?
for sure. Yeah, I mean, Corsair's stock hasn't been doing too hot lately, but I'm not sure what their line of credit is probably gigantic as compared to a repair shop. So I'd say the other big difference is the truly large companies do have more factories they own. So Corsair does actually own some factories. Whereas anyone like in the audience right now, if there's someone who has an idea for a product they want to make, you can design it and you can start shopping it to factories. And you're going to hire a contract factory to make a run of 100 or 1,000 or whatever. And you really don't have a lot of negotiating power. Whereas Corsair, they make some of their own stuff, which is great for them. And they also have the ability to start opening factories in other countries if they see a long-term plan where, they'd have to know that all the tariffs aren't going to be just wiped out tomorrow. But opening a factory in Vietnam or Thailand's been the common choice.
Well, that was one of the other common threads, though, is the folks who were talking about opening factories in other countries seem to have concerns about volatility and making long-term investments in anything to service this market, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, if you think about it, right, like take the extreme with an Intel fab or TSMC fab, and Intel's quoted timeline for us when we did the fab tour video was 3 to 5 years, and I think they're very near that 5-year mark. We're exceeding it. A case and metals factory is obviously faster to make, but you're still talking about like it's really. I think if you think about supply chain, that's the crazy part. Where this is so Nam from CyberPower with the motherboard analogy, it was like such a perfect comparison to make because people think of, generally speaking, assembling a computer, you're just putting the parts together. And so asking a company that assembles a computer in the US, well, why don't you get your parts from the US? The answer is pretty easy. It's because they literally are not made here and they don't make those parts. They have no control over that supply chain. But then a motherboard, it's kind of the same thing where they assemble all the parts in an SMT line, a surface mount technology line, and they're buying all those parts from different places. And so this didn't make it into the piece because it was just too long, but I worked with a couple motherboard vendors to try and approximate how many factories down chain are there.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
Yeah. And so this was really interesting, and we'll probably do a thing with it eventually, but we're getting in the range of about 100 to 120 if you count everybody. So that's
everything
counting.
from like manufacturing the slots to all the little transistors and capacitors and all that stuff.
Wow.
To like
the PCB
the screen
layers.
printing.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and so where it really gets crazy, it's about like 20 to 30 big suppliers, big part suppliers. But then the question I was asking was, well, who's their supplier, right? And who's that person's supplier? And we go all the way down the chain to raw metals. And so that chain, it's like 100 plus factories. And so when you ask any company, why do you make your thing in this country? The answer was typically, well, that's where our suppliers are, and that's where their suppliers are, and that's where their suppliers are.
Yeah, because actually we have a couple of people in the comments like asking like why not build it in the U.S.
Right.
Which you get into
What
obviously in the video.
which I think is it's a good segue into that. Before we hop though, I did want to also kind of dig in real quick to your question for like what's the difference between like a small business versus a publicly traded one, and Steve probably has more information from all the interviews he did. But I think the other thing too is that one of the things that when I was talking to companies, one of the bigger ones mentioned like, hey, so like we're positioned because we're bigger, we can absorb some of this better because we'll have kind of like how you were talking just a moment ago, Steve, about how your blue is doing more than your red. So you can still order, like with the cost being what they were before the tariffs, you could order the red because you knew that you could cushion some of the higher cost from the blue, right?
Right.
And kind of that's what companies were doing with black cases versus like orange or purple, right? They were doing so well with those lines that they could, kind of go, okay, well, like, this is more expensive to produce, but in total, we'll still come out where we want to be. When you're a small business, especially if you're specialized, you don't have that cushion. And so to me, that I think is another big stark thing that people don't realize, and especially dovetailing back to what we're talking about here, which is if a motherboard has 100 plus companies, all purpose like built for a particular thing, and suddenly something disrupts that whole process, the whole thing kind of goes up in flames. And I think that's what we're starting to see, right?
Yeah.
It's like this is very, like the thing that I heard a lot was because we've moved towards this just-in-time kind of economy, like messing it up with like making people having to stockpile or having to front load orders or like change suppliers, like it just throws a huge wrench in all the process. And I think a lot of people still think of manufacturing as like one factory doing everything from like the start to the finish, and it's not like that anymore. It's just so much interweaving.
Yeah.
There's go ahead, Steve, sorry.
Oh no, I was just gonna say on the one of the comments that Wei from Cooler Master made, unfortunately his audio wasn't very good, so we only left a little bit in, but he made a comment where he said the exact quote was, "We're past the point of no return," and I think more people didn't pick up on that because the audio was kind of messy, but so they have 4,000 pallets shipping to the US right now. And so what they're looking at is, they're all in, and that could work out really well for them if everybody else is being more timid, and they're the only ones supplying the market or something. It could also be really bad, like just depending on, like if you imagine stuff comes in, you pay the higher tariff, you have to pass it to the customer, and you end up with excess stock. Long-term tariffs come down or other companies move factories around, and what kind of position does that leave them in? So
Well, and there's all sorts of strange downstream costs from the kind of hither back and forth nature of the way the tariffs are being applied. I know somebody who's building out a fab here in Northern California right now. Like they revamped an old fab, they're putting a new one in, and as part of that process, they're buying a lot of machinery. A lot of it's coming from China. And they took delivery on a machine that was phenomenally expensive during one of those 4-day windows when there were tariffs on this thing. Now they're not. But that 300 grand that they paid to get that machine in the door is gone, right? They're not going to get, like, just because the tariff is on and then it's off doesn't mean they're going to be able to get a refund from the federal government. That $300,000 is going to be added to the total cost of ownership for that machine, and it's going to mean that the output from that fab is slightly more expensive over the next 20 years that machine's in service. And like, that stuff's happening constantly at all sizes of business. I think Lewis and Austin talked about this a lot. He was like, I placed an order for something and was sleepless and losing hair because if I had, I knew I could pay $60,000 for a thing, but if I suddenly had to pay another $75,000 to receive that, then it was going to mean I was going to lose money and potentially have to have major negative consequences for his business. It's bad.
But he said it with more
expletives.
So
he did a lot of crazy.
The thing is, though, I really appreciate that part of the video, because I think that there is something really it drives home the message so much clearer when someone is that blunt about it, right? Like hearing him talk about what it's like to be a small business owner, which, is still not that small. He has employees. Like, the smallest business owners are the ones who are like still going solo or has like maybe one employee, right? Mm-hmm. And there are lots of business like that in the United States. Like, for him just to constantly repeat that, even $50,000 or $60,000 would put him in a deep, deep hole, which on the scale of business, 50 or 60K, I mean, it's a lot to us as individuals, but it's actually not that much in business, right? So to me, that was one of the things that drove it home most. And the fact that he didn't really beat around the bush, and he was very, very, very clear, very New York about how he stated it. For me, that just kind of drove that message home even more, with more impact.
Well, and having been on that small business side, like, you lose, like, it's hard. Like, when you're sitting there and you know how many weeks of payroll you have in your bank account, having $50,000 hanging over you if you have 3 or 4 or 5 people is incredibly stressful. So, like, hearts out to everybody in that situation right now.
I mean, speaking of small business, Steve, right? I mean, you you have a small business. We have this awesome dice. Whether they're actually accurate or not, is we'll see, to be determined.
I'll battle you. We'll do Yu-Gi-Oh style dice rolling battles on screen.
I want to see you all do a D&D campaign for like a charity stream.
We can do that.
That would be great.
But yeah, I mean, just bluntly, the way GamersNexus works relies a lot on being able to sell goods, so that you don't have to rely on YouTube sponsorships or other things like that, which is great. But this has got to be impacting you as well. I know you've talked about it a little bit, but like, can you open the door a little bit on that?
I can, yeah. I left it out of the video because we considered including parts because there's some interesting stuff we've been navigating also. I left it all out because like I want to just let this story be about the people we spoke to, and I feel like they communicate it really well. Mm-hmm. So I didn't want to get in the way of that, but I'm happy to share it here. Yeah, I mean, so we rely on contract manufacturing. I have had people in the past ask why I don't open a mod mat factory in America, and to give a sense for scale, we would occupy such a factory for like maybe 2 days a year, right? So what do you do for the rest of it? And I don't want to run a contract manufacturing business because that's not what I do. It's not what I'm good at. And so like anyone else, use a contract factory. And so we have some of the glassware is made in the U.S. Some of the shirts are like printed in the U.S., stitched and sewn in Latin America, and things like that. And so there's sourcing, you get it wherever you can get the best product, at the best price. And I mean, I'll just share the one direct experience we have. Right now, we have a container of goods where we started the order, I want to say in like October. So that's when we began production. And because we're not the highest on their priorities list, it kind of takes a while to make it all. And they finished production this is in China. They finished production in March. And right now, the container is sitting and pending my sign off to ship it. Normally, when it's done, we immediately get it out the door because I need to be able to sell it, right? So I can make the money back on what I spent. And they're very large investments for us. And so the container's sitting there because I don't know what I'm going to pay when it gets here, and we've spoken to freight forwarders and things like that, and so they can give estimates, and that helps. But unlike Corsair, I don't really have that many strings that I have access to, or I can pull them and try to get someone to do me a favor. We would put it on a boat and then hope for the best. And yeah, so right now it's kind of sitting there. And so what you end up with is you have money tied up in a product because you're worried the risk of not knowing what you pay is higher. And this is an order I started like in October, right? Like, I don't think I have to spell out too clearly, but
Yeah.
like, so I started a long time ago. And
Would you have started it if you had to do it today?
I would not have started as large of an order if I had to do it today. Yeah, and
Well,
we
but
can
that's
deal
what.
with it.
Sorry, real quick. When you say started the order, do you mean that's when you put the order into the manufacturer, or that's when you started designing it? And
That's when we put the order in.
okay, so
Yeah.
you already had time in like designing and thinking up the
Yeah.
product. Okay.
Yeah, and so that's when we put the order in, and they were supposed to ship it a little sooner, but hit delays, but you never plan for like in a 2-month window for there to be that much change. I don't think so. Now in our situation, we're fine, but I was just thinking about it. I mean, if this were the first product I had ordered, like back in 2017 or whenever that was when we did the mod mats, I could see that being a dire situation for a brand new business owner who doesn't really know what they're getting into, and you just might not have the cash, available for that kind of thing. So, whereas for us, it'd be like if I had to bring it in right now, I could. It would really suck, and I'd have to increase the price, a lot to where I don't think it's even worth. I wouldn't. I would tell people not to buy it. It's like not a good deal at that price. But like we could soak it, and I think to like Elena's point earlier, the really small like new businesses don't have that luxury. So
Do you get a sense of what the size is? Like, obviously, we're talking about, you talked from somewhere real small like Lewis all the way up to like a Corsair. Like, where do you think that size consideration is for like, you know what, we can absorb kind of this, or we have the power to navigate around this?
I feel like once a business has the order value of the item in dollars in their bank account after buying it, you're probably pretty safe because you could soak it if you had to at 100%. I think
What do you mean soak it, Steve? Sorry, technical terms.
Just pay,
Technical
just
terms.
fork over all the money, and go down to like if you're a small business and you say I want to make this PCB and I have all these great ideas, I don't know how to source things, I don't understand how to talk to factories in the US, and I don't have any of these abilities. I'm an electrical engineer, right? And I designed a PCB. You might go to PCBWay or one of these companies that's been advertised on YouTube, and a lot of them are in China or in other tariffed countries. Place your order, and if the order's $10,000, and you've got say you saved up, right? You've got 20 grand in the bank. You spend half of it on your order. Suddenly that hits the port, and there's been all these changes in between. One, you're not going to know possibly what even a freight forwarder is, or what a broker is, or that they can help you, or how they can help you. So that's a problem because you'll get a bill and you're basically just going to pay it without asking someone to help and figure out if it's even appropriate. But then two, you just might not have the cash left, and so then what happens, right? You abandon the container. And you have no product. Like
Well, you still owe the taxes even if you abandon
Correct.
the container, right?
Yeah, you would still have to. Yeah, and there's not a lot of options. Like I asked the freight forwarder. I think it made it into the video, but there's you can't like Klarna your taxes, right? You can't like lay it away. So
Well, I thought it was interesting that he was talking about how there was like it's almost like a DMZ. Like actually, it can physically get there, but then you can pay somebody to hold it for you. Obviously, there's costs associated with that, but yeah, that's it's interesting. I did not know
Oh,
that
it
was a
was.
thing. Yeah.
I didn't either. I thought that, yeah, foreign trade zone, I think he called it, FTZ.
Oh, okay.
He
Yeah.
described it as duty free in an airport,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
made a lot of sense.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, that was good.
Steve, I have a question to just make sure I'm doing the mental math right. So you were saying that your estimate of kind of like that tipping point is when you have enough in the bank that is equivalent to the cost of the product, is where you think that tipping point
yeah,
is?
I think it's a personal question. Like how much risk is someone willing to bear? So for me personally, like if I'm below the cost of the product right now, today in cash, then I don't really want to order it because I don't have the confidence that, like, I don't know what the tariff's going to be. So on a personal level, I feel like that's kind of like a reasonable buffer. Now, normally, as an example, there's a product where we paid in the single digit thousands on taxes last year, and to bring that in now, it's somewhere between 40 and 60,000 if I do a reorder of the exact same thing. And so it's complicated because like I don't know. As a small business, you don't. It's not like Cooler Master and Corsair where they have logistics people who are experts in this, and this is all they do, right? Like any small shop, like a repair shop for Lewis, you're dealing with the repair shop, and then this is something you do in an hour after work. And so someone gives you a quote, and you're just like, I don't know, okay. Like, what, here's the money. Like, hopefully that's enough.
So, follow-up question then. With the tariffs, where are they at now? Like 145%-ish, like, right? I mean, doesn't that change that math, or is that, again, still kind of like a personal choice? Because from my perspective, if I was on just trying to look for breaking even, then I would want to have that bigger cushion, right? And
Yeah,
so I
for
think
sure.
that kind of speaks to the uncertainty that everyone keeps talking about. Like, I heard the word a lot when I was doing my interviews. It came up a ton in your video. It's all over the mainstream news about when in relation to these taxes. And so it's kind of like, I mean, I guess maybe I'm kind of pushing for a segue here a little bit, which is, the fact that people are pulling back on what they're shipping over from China, right? Like they're
Yeah.
potentially reducing product lines. They are potentially just abandoning the U.S. market in some ways altogether. And then that also, kind of leads to like, why not manufacture here and, so on and so forth. But from your perspective, running a small business in addition to your business, like what for you would be a comfortable cushion?
I mean, these days it's like, it's such a. I'll preface this by saying it's really up to everyone's risk tolerance, so they shouldn't necessarily copy me. And I know I have absolutely no formal education in business, so it's all just from running it for as long as I have. So for me, it's like you got to know what your payroll is. And actually, we were talking about this. I don't know if it was in the pre-show or not, but Will, you made a comment about small business and knowing. Actually, it was just a little bit ago payroll, but
Yeah, like if you run a small business, everybody who runs a small business until you get to a certain point where you probably have somebody else that you pay to think about this knows exactly how much payroll they have in their bank account.
Right.
Right. Like if I don't make any more money for the rest of the year, how long can I run before I have to start like denying people their livelihood? Because it's
Right.
like that's the responsibility I felt as a small business person who employed people was if I mess this up, then 5 people are going to be out of jobs and they're going to have to go find work someplace else. And that sucks. And I don't want, it's a lot to have on you.
Right. Yeah, and I've always liked having like a year plus of payroll. Like
Yeah.
it feels pretty comfortable because you're basically when you do that, what you're saying is I think any black swan event could happen and I think that'll be resolved within the time that I have this payroll buffer. So, if you think, okay, a year to a year and a half, I can probably figure out just about any problem that would come up in that time. Doesn't matter what it is. Tariffs, like, okay, you reconfigure the business where you maybe rely on less of this type of good as another type of good, or you bring in money from a different avenue, selling whatever software. Like, you can figure out a lot in a year or a year and a half. To have a year or a year and a half of payroll, though, like
It's
that.
an incredible amount of money.
That is
Yeah.
a lot of money, yeah. And you have to be good at not spending it, right? That's the challenge. So, and it's potentially losing value while it's not being spent. So, yeah, I think that's where I am, like on a personal threshold of where do I feel the most comfortable? It's probably in there. Less than that, it's just, I mean, for sure, you can. There's probably like a business class, like how much should you have, versus how much should you invest. But I run things in a very lean way, where it's like the objective for me is always just be in a comfortable position where this type of change that you're seeing right now is like it sucks, but it's not going to like threaten you. It's not existential.
Well, and the other thing you have going for you is you sell direct to consumer, so you don't have to
Right.
deal with retailers, and you're also you have to manage the float of producing and shipping and selling the goods, but you don't have to manage the float of 60-day or 90-day terms from the retailers, which basically means you can pay for something in October and not see a penny from it until June,
Right.
right? When you get to the end of the process, and like that's a problem for everybody. Intel and Nvidia have that problem. You have that problem.
Yeah.
Lewis has that problem.
Yeah.
It's all like that's universal.
Yeah. The retailer thing was super interesting, as you mentioned, though. Like the fact that the manufacturers are finally at a point where they're like, these retailers are, they're basically just saying they're making too much money. It's like I've never seen a manufacturer throw a retailer under the bus that fast.
No, never.
Yeah, well, because I mean, those are relationships that you don't typically want to put stress on, right? Because they want the retailer to stock their stuff. So when they clap back, I was like, oh wow,
Yeah,
okay, that was
just like I was surprised that like that frustration. It sounded more like relational frustration, which is like, come on, like we're all hurting here. Like, why aren't you willing to give a little? That's kind of how I heard it.
Right.
But again, like to my earlier point in the show, the fact that we're getting this much transparency on camera from people. And not even, where they're like, okay, well, you can mention it in your article, but don't direct quote us, kind of thing. Like, to me, that's a huge sign of just the emotional journey these companies have been on between March, when I first started talking to them, to just, barely a month later in April when Steve was doing his interviews. Like, a month isn't really that long. And so for that much chaos to cause that much change in behavior, I think says a lot, as I think someone said earlier in the show, about like the meta story here about what's happening.
Right.
yeah.
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 Well-
and just to be clear for people who haven't watched the video yet, the complaint is retailers are taking the same percentage on the post-tariff money. They're taking their percentage
Regardless.
off of the post-tariff rather than the pre-tariff, which yeah. Anyway.
Yeah.
So retailers are doing great. Tariffs are great for retailers.
Well,
is what I'm hearing.
until stock dries up and they don't have anything on the shelf.
At least for
and,
that
yeah.
contract, right? Whatever agreement that particular company has with their retailers.
I learned something interesting about margin. This didn't have a place in the video. It wasn't directly related enough, but for one of the companies, at least, the negotiated margin they have with the retailer is the retailer wants 25%. So like Micro Center is, I'll just name it. Doesn't matter if I name that. So Micro Center wanted 25% for the case products. But then for fans separately, it was a higher margin demand, typically closer to 40. And so the reason this was interesting to me is because it's like, suddenly if it makes more sense now when companies sell a case with fans versus a case without fans, because the demand on the manufacturer for more room for margin is lower on a quote unquote case with 6 fans than it is on a case and then 6 separate fans. And I don't know why retailers, divvy it up that way, but that was, I never knew that. That was pretty interesting.
I think
Yeah,
he
that-
also. Oh, sorry. Go ahead,
Go ahead.
Will.
No, go ahead, Elena.
Oh, I was going to say that for me, that tidbit was also very illuminating about why we see such a difference sometimes between like what retailers are able to do with like deals and sale prices versus like what companies are saying the MSRPs are, right? So, I mean, from my understanding, getting this, piece of information is that the MSRPs are based on like these, projections they're making and, how much they're having to divvy up the pot basically. Whereas the retailers, as Steve said, if you're taking 40% on a fan, I mean, you can discount it 20%. You're still making, your 20%. And maybe you're getting them to buy other things while you're there, shopping online or in your store.
The other The other thing that I thought was like the thing that I knew I understood conceptually, but I didn't really appreciate is how fractally complex all of this is. Like the difference between you talking to, say, I think you talked to the person who does logistics at Cooler Master versus talking to somebody like Lewis who's informed but uses external help to do that, to do his importing and exporting work. Like the difference in understanding about how this whole process works is the same as I read a thing like 10 years ago about a guy named Thomas Thwaites who built a toaster from scratch. Like he went into a mine in England and dug up the ore and refined that, and then he made a really terrible toaster just as a to make a point about how incredibly complicated the worldwide supply chain is
That's
for
great.
making something that cost $5 at Tesco, right? And like you look at a motherboard, you know that there's 1,000 components on that thing, and it takes the work of 10,000 people to produce one motherboard and put it in my PC sitting under my desk here. I don't think I appreciated how complex the supply chain stuff is too, with like this things like the free trade zones. And it seems like even inside the space, the only people who know that are the ones who that's their job at big giant companies, which was shocking to me as well.
Yeah, no, I think that's it's really, I think at the size where you can employ people to figure it out, it's really interesting, right? Because it's now you're getting into how can we optimize the government rules that are in place in governments across the entire world to try and find places where, if we like go through this region, we can save $2 a unit, and whereas some solo prop shop, like sole proprietor, their biggest concern is who can make this thing and ship it to me. And you're not necessarily thinking about all these steps. Like I wouldn't think about, I still don't think about like, where are free trade zones and how can I use those to my advantage? That's not a concern of most, I think, people who are just trying to operate day to day. So it's a big advantage of the huge companies for sure.
But even for them, it's become a increased operational costs from what I was told. So, I mean, you're employing these people to kind of min-max for you so that you can get your operational costs down. But because of all this uncertainty, now you're having people just kind of doing work, throwing it out, doing work, throwing it out. And that keeps companies from being able to allocate the same resources to figuring out like what cool new things they can bring you. How can they bring it to you more cheaply? So I generally I am not, I don't have a lot of sympathy for companies. I'm neutral towards them, right? It's a business.
Companies are not your friend.
Yeah.
But listening to everybody just kind of talk about this and, more specific, and I think this is the reason for the radical transparency is because I think they all know if they don't not come clean, but like if they aren't so transparent with everybody, people will still continue on believing that companies are making certain moves because they're greedy, because they're trying to hose the consumer and not really understanding like there are just certain realities that you can extrapolate out to your own personal budget, right? Like if you realize that you can't spend as much on eggs because they've gone up, now you have to spend extra time thinking like, what other recipes can I make? If you have dietary concerns, what other recipes can I make that won't upset my stomach or, set off my medical condition or whatever? And that takes away resources from being able to take up a new hobby or, put money towards a charity you care about or help out your niece with a school project, things like that. And they still apply to businesses too. And, it's just so striking to me how this is going down.
I think it's also for us, like for GN, being so hyper cynical of everything. It's also I'm looking at it at the same time. Like I get what everyone's saying, and all of the numbers make sense. But then at the same time, right, there's part of it like, who's going to try and use this to screw people over and by how much?
For sure.
Right?
That was going to be my question too. Like, did you get any sense of that in any of these talks?
Not really.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like anyone who showed us or stated numbers, I feel pretty good about at least trusting those specific numbers to be accurate. I'd seen there was maybe one or two comments I saw where someone was like, well, how do you know the numbers in the spreadsheet are accurate? It's like, I mean, because the risk to reward isn't there to lie that much, like maybe they might move it a little bit to obfuscate supply chain. I don't know, but like I feel pretty good about those numbers based on what information we have access to. It's the companies that don't want to talk, I think, where I mean, some of it's just because they're publicly traded or whatever, but there is absolutely abundant opportunity here to say now is the time, like we've been wanting GPUs to be $1,500 for a long time. Now is the time. So it's just who's going to do that. And I don't know. And it's going to be very difficult to, it'd be basically impossible, I think, to prove if they're doing it out of necessity or if they're doing it to make more money, like.
Well, and one of the things that, I mean, you didn't get into in the video, but I would have thought it'd been an interesting follow-up is, say this whole tariff thing blows over. Say at the end of the day, it's a whole big nothing.
Haha, just kidding.
Just kidding. It's, but it still has already had impact to prices and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like I think there's another opportunity of companies being like, okay, well, we raised the price. Oh, well, now are you going to go back and lower it? It's hard for companies to lower prices like that, or after they raise them.
This is a great topic.
This is a great topic. Steve, did you want to go first? Because I also had some discussions with companies.
Go ahead.
About it.
No, yeah, you go first.
Oh,
yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, so one of the things that I was talking to companies about was that, and it came up in Steve's video as well, is that the cost they've already paid, and Will said it too, it's like if you've already paid X amount for a piece of equipment or for a container being shipped, like that cost doesn't go away, even if the tariffs now have dropped for current and future shipments, right? So you're still going to have to make yourself whole, make your business, stable again after all that happens. And then on top of that, I think there's just a little bit of psychology in there as well. Like, what happens if you lose your job? I don't think as soon as you get a new one, you're going to immediately just start, I mean, some people will, but a lot of people won't just start immediately spending like crazy. They're going to remember that it was hard to buy groceries, or, they might, it's a new job. Like what if you get laid off again from this because you're the new person, right? So they're going to be more conservative about any, major financial changes they're making. And I think to a degree, companies will have a similar approach. Not all of them, but some will. And some are going to be on their makeup, how they're structured, who runs them. Some are going to hang on to that longer than others.
Yeah, I think the short answer for me of like, do prices come back down after? So, I mean, sure, there's going to be like caveats of, okay, some companies probably yes, but broadly speaking, I think the answer is no. I think it's for a lot of reasons. One of them is, you bring you bring in 4,000 pallets of items, and 8 months later, no more tariffs, you still have those items. You're not going to drop the price. You already paid for it. And now it's been sitting there and it's aging inventory. And so maybe drop it for that reason to try and move it. But once it's been, I guess the point being that companies will have to clear the inventory they have if they aren't refunded by the federal government for the tax they paid. They're going to have to clear that inventory before they could even think about dropping the price. And then you have the point Elena's making, which is similar to one Lewis was making of, well, but now that you're making more per unit with the tariffs gone, maybe now is a good time to try and stack up because you've realized you didn't have enough money before, right?
Stockpile, right? Yeah.
Yeah, stockpile mentality. And then you also have everyone's going to kind of have a different gauge of what they feel, how much they feel inflation has affected their purchasing power as a company. And so they might want to hedge against that. And so, and then there's also just the pure cynical look of why would you drop the price if nobody else really is? So if everyone's looking at each other like, is anyone going to do it? Like,
right.
And no one drops it.
Yeah.
Right? Like, unless you're really desperate for market share, I don't.
Yeah. Exactly that.
Yeah.
Like Height touched on that, right, in your video where they were saying like they're a young company, so they were taking lower margins on things because they just want to have that name recognition. They want people to know who they are, so they're pushing into the market, kind of like how AMD did, right, when they were trying to rebuild their reputation around CPUs. So we had the crazy fire sales on early Ryzen chips, and now they're better positioned. They've also went through the pandemic, and they had those supply issues, and I think we're kind of tariffs. In some ways, as someone has just pointed out in the chat, I feel like the pandemic in some ways is a little bit of a example for what we may be able to expect in terms of how the tariffs end up affecting prices and companies' reactions to that and lowering prices and so on and so forth.
Well, we also got another comment in the chat. I don't want to call them out specifically, but I'm going to. Shraf2K said, it's okay. NVIDIA's profit margin is near 75% on consumer GPUs. They can afford to absorb the cost. Is that true?
The margin, I
Yeah.
think that's pretty close to
Yeah.
accurate. Yeah.
So why can't they absorb the cost?
Oh, they can. Yeah, shareholders is the real answer. Yeah.
Look, it's because they're already losing 90% of value versus making that Blackwell for the data center.
Right.
So, look, you're getting a 90% discount on a data center part when you buy that consumer Blackwell. That's the thing to remember.
The more you buy, the more you save.
Falcon Northwest in the chat, friend of the show, Kelt, I assume, also had a secondary effect point. There's a lot of secondary effects which I want to ask about as well. But he said when tariffs cause inflation, which is tariffs are an inflationary tax, the Fed will need to keep interest rates high to fight it, which means that will keep borrowing costs high. And he doesn't say this, but the implication then is that the people who are floating their 6-month turn on purchases with credit will be paying more for that, which means that will also get factored into the cost of these things. And then because the high prices reduce sales, that will reduce the scale. Because the thing Heights called out explicitly, Elena, is that they were doing a low margin on their cases because they wanted to build market share so that they could have higher volume and get lower prices on the next wave of products, which is like everybody talks about building market share and loss leading, thinking, oh yeah, we're just throwing away money because we want everybody to know how famous we are. But it's really because they want to be able to sell a lot more of the next thing. And
I mean, it's for a purpose, right? You're gaining something in exchange for it. Businesses don't give away something for nothing, right? There's usually
non-venture funded businesses.
I mean, is that giving really?
I took a lot of cheap Ubers back on the.
But is that giving?
Andreessen Horowitz time. Yeah.
Yeah, Falcon's an interesting one too, because like the other SIs we were speaking to, like the question of the one I loved asking it every time because I got my best Gordon out, where it's like, why don't you just make it in America, right? Like, it's really interesting to see how everyone answered that, and the SIs were both like, we do, we don't make the motherboards.
Yeah,
like, how much
the
do you
part
want
that
us to
they
make?
can do, they do,
right?
But
yeah, and that was where CyberPower or iBuy, one of them, I think we left it in the video, but one of them made the comment of like, do people even want us to make it? Like, do you really want us to make your motherboard, and your CPU and I mean, strictly on the consumer side and reviewer side, like my answer to that is no. It's like I've seen how you guys make computers, and I really don't want you to make a video card. And so, so it's like,
dang.
Wow, that is some shade.
And
hope you said that to their face.
We need an ambulance for that, Bird.
And it's all fair, right? Because it's like, what's the thing you're best at, and how much, like Nam said, how much do you want to stretch that expertise? Where CyberPower can put together a good computer, and they have done it in the past. But to then just say, well, let's spin up an SMT line in America and start making video cards and design the PCB for it. And so it's interesting where a company like Falcon in the chat, it's almost a ridiculous question for them because their job is to spec out and design the build by parts and then put it together, not to literally make the parts. So,
except for the case, he does manufacture the case.
That's true. Yeah, a lot of them do cases. Yeah.
I will say, jumping off of Steve's point here, not just for the shade aspect of it, but I mean, I think it also just shows, there have been some cases where you've done your investigative work, and it turns out that there was maybe a flub at the factory, right, or a misunderstanding of the design, But I think that's a really nuanced point that should be highlighted, which is that these are factories that have been doing this for what decades at this point.
Yeah.
They have finely refined, sorry, I don't know what I'm saying here. They have highly refined processes in place, right? They are the experts Like I heard that often in the video. I've heard that often elsewhere that because they've spent so much time getting specialized in this, they know best how to do this. And if they're making mistakes, just imagine what happens when you're first spinning up like the same thing somewhere new, right? And I've talked to companies about this where they've talked about, you know, building out new factories in Vietnam or India or other places, right? There's not just the cost of building the facility, there is the human resource part that's a cost, because you have to get people who are trained enough to be able to not make mistakes that are costly for production, right? So it's not just that, do you trust these companies to make a good product, but it's, do you trust them to be able to front to back be able to create a process that will be as efficient as what we have now with no hiccups? Like that's impossible. And I think, was it the representative from Height even mentioned this towards the end of the video, which is when you start anything new, it's going to suck like to some degree at the beginning. So people who are advocating for manufacturing in the US, which is a great notion. Like we should have some safety for, you know, not being too dependent on others. It would be good to have more jobs for people that give them a variety. But at the same time, if you're also expecting quality to maintain its level, like those are almost two impossible asks at the same time if you're not allowing some runway between the two. Do you know what I mean? Like just going cold turkey doesn't work.
I think if I were to try and play the other side of it, probably I think the best argument I could come up with for that is like, I accept the premise that the quality will go down in the near term and the price will go up, but I think it's like playing the devil's advocate position. It's like, I think this is the right thing to do or something, or this
for
is
the future,
best for the future, right? I think that's the argument. I'm not sure how I would tackle that, I guess. Well, so I'm just throwing it out there.
This is a question I wanted to ask everybody on the show, though, because this is something that I've been thinking about, right? Which is like, we've heard this term, which is short-term pain for long-term gain, basically, right? But I want to know, like, how are people defining short-term? Is it 2 years? Is it 5 years? Is it 10 years? Is it 15? Is it 30? That's a whole generation, right? Like, how are we viewing short-term? Because that is such a general classification, and it can mean something different to everybody. And I think tied to that point, which is why I appreciated Lewis's part of the interview, which is what he said, y'all aren't honest. Like, he said it much more strongly than this, but I mean, we are trying to get Disney sponsorship, right, at some point. So
McDonald's.
So, is it McDonald's now? I forgot what year we're on. So it's like, he's like, y'all say you want manufacturing in the U.S., you want to support it, but you won't pay the prices for it. I see you buy the cheap stuff. And so it's like consumer emotional philosophy is not lining up with actual consumer behavior. So like the cross section between like what's a short enough term pain for you versus how much are you willing to bear that, financially. I'm kind of curious, like, what you think other people mean when they say short-term pain, right? Because I think a lot of times we're so used to abundance now. We're so used to having everything ready and available to us.
And so many options.
That I think when we think short-term, we're thinking like maybe a year at most.
Right.
At most, like if your household can even float that, like, and that's the other thing too. It's like you have to be pretty privileged to be able to stomach higher costs for things. Like, yes, maybe you'll buy one or two things made in America and you're like, yeah, I can afford that. But if everything goes up, you're going to have to start making choices. And are you going to be able to offload or postpone all of those choices, right? So, and then it becomes, okay, when do you draw that line? Like 6 months, year, 5? Like, I personally think that beyond 5 years is not short term anymore. But that's me.
I think the some of the guys in the interviews made good points with this, where it was maybe there's a way to try and protect a particular segment or industry and try to build that locally or something, but it needs to ideally be done in a strategic way with a controlled rollout and like a fixed roadmap of within this many years we want to be at this point in manufacturing locally or whatever. It's really, it's just the uncertainty that kind of... Roman was actually a great person to have in there too, from Thermal Grizzly, their Bauer. Because we got the EU perspective where, he said it makes him hesitant to invest in a business here where he's a guy who actually owns a factory in Germany. And, he's done this. He's like brought manufacturing to his country and still uses outsourced factories, but he used to be only outsourced factories as far as I'm aware. But yeah, he's looking at it and saying this is too uncertain. I can't risk it, so. But one of the interesting things that years ago when we did a factory tour in China, I was speaking with the factory owner, and I asked him a question about his competitors because he was telling us how the claim was that it was becoming difficult for them to find workers. So this was an old school factory where it's like they keep the lights off because it's too hot in the building. They've got the light over the bench you work at, and there's not a whole lot of safety standards. And so it was like an old school factory as opposed to some of the highly automated ones we've been in. And he was saying he's having trouble finding workforce, which was really interesting. And I asked him, well, like, are your competitors having this trouble, or are the ones who have modernized, do they find it easier? And he pointed to the Starbucks across the street and he said, that's my competitor. I was like, that's really interesting because his point of view, and I have no way to know the whole sort of market there, but his point of view was that the service industry was starting to pick up there. And so there's all this investment in automation and robotics and things like that, where you've got everything from the old school factories like that one all the way up to, it's like, I've been in a Cooler Masters factory where they have one room where it's all robots and there's one dude in there, and so I guess from that perspective, it's like you have to go through all these stages to develop the automation, and maybe you can deploy it locally, and that'll help with cost control, especially with labor cost, where we have higher cost of living, higher standard, and things like that. I think it would have to go to more robotics. So I just don't. It's just that's expensive, right? So,
and that unfortunately also kind of eliminates the whole talking point of more jobs, right? I mean, someone, as you said, needs to control the robots and monitor them, but it's not the same as having many factory workers on the line, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, oh yeah, go ahead, Will. Sorry.
No, I was gonna take a tangent. So go ahead.
I was about to kind of too, which is like going back to an earlier question in the chat from somebody. It's like, why Vietnam? Why not the United States? And we've started touching on some of that, but also, a lot of companies also aren't quite sure yet if they want to invest in new factories and other places too because of the uncertainty. So we can cover that in a moment. I actually am interested to hear what your tangent is.
Oh, I was going to ask, how is this going to affect pre-order businesses and things like Kickstarter? Like, I've talked to a couple of friends who have built, like a friend of mine, Jesse, who's one of the co-founders of Keyboardio. They make the Model 100, which is a fantastic ergonomic mechanical keyboard. And they started making those because nobody was making mechanical ergonomic keyboards 10, 15 years ago.
Yo.
And their basic stance, they built their business on Kickstarter, where they do all their setup costs for a new product as part of a Kickstarter campaign, and then they can sell in an ongoing manner once they've established like factory relationships and all of that kind of stuff. And he's been really vocal about just saying, look, we can't make new products using the way we've done this in the past, because with the volatility in tariffs, the keyboard that's already a luxury item at $300 with a nice wooden shell and the whole thing is going to be $600 to $800 in the current context. And like they know there's no market, there's no market for that. So they're not going to do the 10,000 piece order that they usually do. So it's going to, instead of being $800, it'll probably be $1,000 because they'll only make 5,000 of them, and the cost and everything goes up as a result. And like, did you talk to anybody about pre-order stuff at all, or not?
Yeah. Pre-orders and warranties both came up. Both of them are really interesting. So pre-orders, the challenge is they're, and we'll kind of leave aside the discussion of how much of it is on them for taking the pre-order, but there's a challenge of your taking in an MSRP that you think you can sustain based on the current pricing, and then if the pricing changes in between now and then, you're screwed, right? Like, you already took the money. So you need to be liquid enough to either refund everyone and say, oops, sorry, which is fine, or you need to fulfill the order and eat that cost. And Height's dealing with that with the thick Q80. that they launched as a pre-order, I think, in January, and they intend to fulfill the ones that they have, but they're going to do so at massive losses per unit, because coolers are also, as I understand it, not exempt currently.
Yeah.
They're not one of the exempt items. And so, yeah, it's that simple. It's like you either refund everyone and apologize and cancel your order, I guess, or you eat the cost because you already took the money. Because you can't. I think what's not okay is if you sold someone an item and you go back to them and you say, actually, I need more money, please. Like, because at that point they should just cancel their order. So, yeah, that's a problem. The warranty thing was interesting too, because if as companies reduce shipment into the U.S. and divert shipment elsewhere, there's sort of less supply available. And so the companies I have spoken to are holding on to the sort of usual fixed inventory for RMA purposes. But you could see like potentially delays in getting a warranty replacement or something if they're just not shipping as much stuff to the U.S. And they don't have the inventory ready for it. So could be knock-on effects.
You don't take a lot of review product, do you, at this point? Like a product sent to you for review?
Mostly GPUs and CPUs now, yeah.
Okay.
Some cases.
I've seen stuff from people that do like makeup and housewares type reviews on Instagram and TikTok complaining about getting huge tariff bills when they get a case of evaluation samples, right?
Yeah.
Which is right. Yeah. Anyway, this is a very specific problem for our
influencers.
But here's the thing: as much as we're laughing, though, like that is another example of how this affects small business, right?
True.
Yeah.
Because I mean, these are actually almost could be considered micro businesses, right? A lot of times they're just one person. They're doing sponsorships, maybe. They're not making probably even a lot of money. It might not even be a full-time job for them, but it's still probably something that is necessary for paying daily living expenses. So if you're suddenly hit with a 145% bill if it's coming from China, and you didn't have to have that as a line item in your expenses, that's going to hurt. Because I'm guessing a lot, especially if they're young influencers, they probably don't have a lot of cash cushion. So
I think the biggest thing is a lot of people are going to not understand what's happening, because like when we ship stuff internationally, when someone buys something on our store, some countries will hold the item at the post office and require some kind of customs and duties, and it's really kind of up to each person to understand that. And broadly speaking, especially in the EU, for people who have to deal with that regularly anyway, they kind of understand how it works. I think there's going to be a lot of people who are confused by it here in the early stages of like, wait, it doesn't just show up at my house, or it shows up with a bill,
Yeah.
Because like FedEx and UPS, I don't know if it depends on the relationship with them or not, but they'll front some of that cost and then they'll bill you for it. So that makes it a little simpler, but is still a surprise. I did see some comments that I appreciated in the news videos covering tariffs, where some of our European viewers are like, aha, now you see what VAT is like.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of springing off that, did any of the companies that you talked to about pre-orders talk about like what kind of delays consumers might expect? Because, so for example, I am currently uncertain if I will ever actually see my analog 3D, because that was a pre-order last fall, and it was supposed to come out in Q1. Didn't hit the timeline target, and then now there are all the tariffs happening. So I'm guessing they're scrambling. I haven't reached out to them. I probably should. I figured they got enough on their plate. But I'm guessing they're scrambling to figure out how they can probably actually hit that price point that they asked everyone to pay at for their pre-orders, right? And so I don't think there was even an email. I just went to the website and it was like cross out Q3 or like Q4, and I was like, well, okay, like it's delayed, but I mean, I'm still half expecting that at some point they're going to say like, sorry, we're going to have to do a refund, or I don't know what's going to happen, because it's not a Kickstarter, so they can't just take the money. I think it was actually, if I remember, it was actually a pre-order through their store.
Yeah.
So the normal regulations around that probably would apply. But yeah, I'm just kind of wondering, like, are people who do pre-orders kind of just in this indefinite limbo? Did companies give any indication of like how long they can expect customers, can expect?
Yeah, I know that Height is trying to just ship their cooler as soon as it's ready. For other companies, the strategy they would have to consider is how long do they want to play the waiting game to see if things get better for their product category, tariffs wise, versus just get it over with, not, rip the band-aid off approach and like, okay, we'll eat the cost on this one and then hopefully we can adjust the price later. So yeah, it just comes down to strategy. To answer specifically, like I know that Height intends to fulfill theirs, but they're going to be losing like hundreds of dollars per unit on the Q80s because they already pre-sold it, right? And so again, you can kind of get into the whole discussion of like, well, you pre-sold it, so you're taking on a known risk. This is maybe not one people would expect, but it is like a part of that risk. Doesn't change the situation for them though. I mean, that's just some businesses just run that way. So
Yeah.
Almost feels like, it's called was a force majeure or whatever that term is, where it's just like act of God, where it's just
Right.
like, well, a tsunami just took out everything that I
Yeah.
had saved up. Great.
Right.
Yeah. I do want to start winding it down because I want to be cognizant of Steve's time, but we do have a couple quick questions in the chat I want to get to.
Is the first one, why did I make the tariffs?
Yeah. Why are you making it worse?
Look, Steve, usually you yell about things you're angry about. I didn't see any yelling in this video.
Yeah. Steve likes tariffs.
I was trying to be
Steve
very
loves
measured.
tariffs.
Yeah,
Well,
very measured.
But before I get to some of these questions, I guess the last major thing I want to touch on is, what do you think? What is the practical advice for consumers right now? Like, I would assume most people probably are just not going to buy, or wait, or look towards used. Is that even an option? Steve, what do you recommend people do right now?
Yeah, I think to make it easier to answer, I think I have to like silo the different situations. So, like, let's just assume someone feels pretty financially comfortable and secure, and whether or not they're going to have some kind of economic impact. Like, let's ignore all that, right? Like, talking about someone who feels pretty good, their only question is, do I buy it now or do I buy it later? I mean, I think for that, first of all, to the used question, used from the last places I looked, like a week ago, used was still a great option, especially for things like cases where they don't really tend to age. Like maybe the fans, get jammed with dust or something. Those are cheap to replace though. So stuff like that, I mean, used is great if especially for things that are mostly metals, heat sinks, cases, power supply, if you can get them to just verify that it works. So yeah, that's always a good option. But if you feel really financially secure and the price doesn't look like it's moved yet, then it does seem more likely that it would be cheaper now than it will be in several months. I think that's probably a fair estimate. I don't think they'll really come down. Because even for the companies that could for some reason come down, if all your competitors are going up, you're going to go up minus 10%, like why wouldn't you if you're like Corsair or something? So,
Did
I
you
think
get
go ahead.
Sorry. Did you get a sense that people, like did you get a sense that any of the people you talked to have any idea what the long-term impact on this is out beyond, like, it seems like a lot of people are just planning for, hey, can we stockpile inventory for long enough to weather this tide, and what happens if it goes beyond that?
Yeah, the closest thing I got was some companies that are looking at doing manufacturing in, again, like Vietnam, Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore, and trying to use that as a hedge, but they were estimating a 30 to 35% cost increase from inefficiency from the factories not having the experience or the know-how or the tools.
And it's a years-long process spinning that stuff up.
Correct. Yeah. So that's definitely the long-term look. And then the Cooler Master logistics rep we spoke to, she said, her concern was that there was going to be an impact to employment for people. And the freight forwarder we spoke to said the same thing, where his point specifically was like, LA has a lot of shipping industry, couriers, trucking, logistics, all this. And if there's less demand for those, I mean, right now there was a story this morning I saw where Ocean freight is way down.
Yeah, I covered this actually for the
Oh,
site
did
this
you?
morning. Yeah, but go ahead and finish.
PCWorld.com.
Yeah, go ahead and finish because I do want to jump in with some thoughts, but I want you to.
Well, so you probably have the percentage. I don't remember it, but the story about ocean freight being down and I mean, logically, it would seem that would affect the need for people to curry it. So, maybe you go to a flex workforce, or you cut workers, or you furlough people. But that was the Cooler Master concern anyway, and I think it's logical. So.
The thing I saw this morning was the Port of Long Beach, where they normally have 11,000 trucks through every day, had 3 trucks lined up waiting to exit. So
Yeah.
That doesn't sound good.
So, so I wrote about this for the site because, there was some rumors earlier this week about how like the Port of Seattle is completely empty, and I wanted to see if that was true. It's not. However, the Port of LA, which is not just the biggest port in the U.S., but of all of North America, if I remember correctly, their executive director came out and said earlier this week, or was it late last week, that by next week, they're anticipating shipments to be down by 35% year over year. And so as part of that, he gave an interview to KTLA, which is one of the local news broadcast stations down there, and he was saying that some of the expected impacts are that so as the shipping reduces, then freight needs are going to reduce. So anticipation of layoffs in both your longshoremen, which are the dock workers, and then the truckers as well. And then on top of that, retailers, I believe major retailers, were telling him that they're expecting for like the kind of level of inventory we're used to seeing, like where you can walk into Target and you can just buy that bottle of bleach because it's just ready and available for you. They're estimating another maybe 5 to 7 weeks left of that. And then after that, they are anticipating potential empty shelves or limited availability. The example he gave was, you're used to just being able to go and buy a blue shirt. Well, you might walk into the store, you'll find one option for a blue shirt, but 4 purple shirts, right? Because they just don't have that stock. They don't have that inventory for you.
Wait, are you suggesting that I'm not going to be able to get 30 different flavors of Oreos in a month?
I offered you flavored Oreos, and you turned me down.
Yeah.
And this is the karmic retribution for that, Will.
Oh, it's my fault.
Got him.
I did
It is your
Got him.
fault.
Wow.
This is what happens when you turn down my goodwill gestures. So
Elena, you said 30% reduction is what they're predicting?
35% year over year by next week if the trend continues.
So-
I was looking at another news report as well. I think it was Investors Business Daily, and they had talked to Axios, one of the asset management firms, and their chief economist over there had estimated that cancellations for shipments are at around 50%. So, and they gave it an estimated timeline of by mid-May, shipments drying up, by late May, freight drying up, and then by early June, layoffs happening in those, ancillary adjacent industries, and then by summer, a recession. So that's kind of the bleak outlook right now for all of that.
Jeez.
So one of the things I wrote for the site, which is basically like, okay, you kind of like, if you need to replace your PC this year, you kind of have 3 options, which is like buy now while you still can, wait and try to stretch your PC, or
save money just in case.
or just save money just in case, and just kind of try to wait it out. But as we were just been talking about this whole show, which is we don't know what the pricing is going to look like. And if I said, like I said earlier, if we're using pandemic as kind of an example for this, like things shot up so high, like inflationary, like costs shot up so high, and there was just that extended period while things were kind of normalizing because of the scarcity, because of demand, because of panic buying. I mean, I don't think tech is going to really have panic buying the way like toilet paper did, right? But I mean, I assume people
Toilet
aren't
paper's
wiping their
made in the
butts
US,
with.
so,
I assume
yeah.
people aren't wiping their butts with their tech. I don't recommend it.
Hey,
Go bidet,
don't
go
knock
bidet.
it.
I'm not recommending it. Okay, I'm just gonna
Got
go
a lot
on the
of
record.
judgment.
I'm just saying.
Finstacks,
No, No, this is why you get a bidet.
Do we get
Wow, we
the
broke
Gordon,
Steve at the
the Gordon
beginning.
nanometers?
We broke Steve at the beginning of the show. We're breaking Steve at the end of the show. Oh man. But
Yes, liquid cooling is what
Oh,
Willis was
gosh.
recommending.
so even still, right? Like you could buy used, but even still, like we saw this with cars during the pandemic, right? Where like there's shortages of cars or like prices went up. Used cars market went like right through the roof as well, right? So you can buy used, but who knows how that pricing for that will go as well? Like that could shoot up. So everything could just suck is basically how it goes.
Thanks,
and you have
Steve.
to decide. My recommendation to
tariffs.
readers is you have to decide if you want to preemptively try to get ahead of that, if you can afford it, or you think that it might be necessary for you, that like maybe your PC is like integral to your job. So and you weren't anticipating having to upgrade it this year, but maybe you go ahead and do it because you're like, man, I don't want to have to be stuck with super high costs if I replace it when I normally would. Or do you have a Windows 10 machine that doesn't qualify for Windows 11? You're like, well, I guess it's the year of Linux now.
Yeah, boy. That's what I've heard.
Bringing it back around. I recommend Chrome OS. I'm just saying. It's also easier for when you have to do tech support for your loved ones. I'm not teaching my parents how to use Linux. That's all I'm saying, guys.
Come on.
The international, to give a point of reference on that 30% reduction in containerized shipping, that's terrifying. In 2020, the first half of 2020, when the whole world shut down for 2 months, containerized imports declined 7% from the 2019 year. And if we're talking about a 30% decline, it's going to hit in all sorts of weird places that we don't expect, right? Wow. I think George talked about packaging a little bit in your video, Steve, but that's the one that like I think we're going to find out who buys their packaging from China and who buys it here real soon.
Right.
So, anyway.
Wow. Okay. Well, yeah. Last question I have for you, Steve, specifically. How is this going to affect what you cover at GN? Because, like...
just slap him with
I'm
this
just like,
gigantic
hey,
question,
listen.
right? We're going to close the show with this gigantic question.
Yeah, I mean, listen. I mean, we saw this with the new GPU launches, right? Like everyone is like, man, why are you even reviewing these things? You can't get them. The prices are horrible.
I don't blame them. I mean, I reviewed it and I was like, why am I reviewing this?
So, I mean, if we're looking at the same situation where there's not going to be as many products, people aren't going to be in a buying market.
If you want me to answer like with the actual, how would I like strategically, navigate that? I think the answer is we do additional. So like during COVID's the best analog here, when GPU supply was abysmal and everyone was pissed off all the time. We started doing more things like we'll look at handhelds and pre-built and like these other sectors where we could do really cool testing with it. We just normally don't, and that's kind of where the pre-built series came back to life for us. And that's been really fun. So we would look at like complete technologies like that, where, it's like a little bit different, but, the other thing though, with like the tariff situation, if that's going to affect all electronics, is I think you see us doing more of the Thermal Grizzly video we just did, which is a really cool educational piece. The AIO meshless is a computer case we had reviewed, but most of that video was an educational thing about how cross-flow fans work with all these 3D animations that we did. Andrew on the team did those. So I think we do more stuff like that, where it's like, okay, well, if the products themselves are not things we can recommend in certain prices or categories or whatever, then we probably shift focus to more like educational. Like the goal is to give something that can be used in some kind of long-term fashion. And normally that's a product review where someone buys it and uses it for 3 years. But if that's not it, because we're not recommending buying things, then it's going to be, education and like these sort of documentary type videos like the factory tour, or maybe more things like the Tariffs video, or talking to a lot of people. So fortunately, I think we're in a good spot where we have a lot of different things we can cover, and it's, you just kind of adjust. But
you know what you should do?
Oh, here we go.
Dyson reviews.
Okay.
Get back to that.
What a callback.
Do you want to go in on a channel with me,
Yeah, there
we'll
we go.
make it
Yeah.
right now. Yeah.
Wait, but is it going to be also educational? Like, are you going to take apart a Dyson and explain to me why it costs so much?
Yeah,
Because
you
I
got-
would love to
you-
know that.
You got to make a chamber, and you could test the pressure and the valves and
We
airflow.
could definitely do really good noise testing on vacuum cleaners.
Look,
we are oddly well equipped for that.
Oddly, I think it's awesomely.
Yeah.
I bought a vacuum cleaner last year, and there's nobody doing good reviews of them anymore. So if you want
Actually,
to,
it is true.
open up GamersNexus, let me know.
Yeah.
Is that an oxymoron?
Or-
If it blows, if it sucks, we let you
Suck
know or
world.
something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, also real quick, did you talk to Roman about my scented thermal paste idea?
We
I haven't watched the
actually
video
did.
yet. Oh, did you? Is it in the video? I haven't watched it yet.
It's not, but we have another part coming up. Maybe I'll shove it in there just for you.
Yes.
I didn't think about including it. Yeah, we did talk about it. He had some thoughts.
About how amazing the idea is. I know.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't wait. I'll be there on day one.
Wait,
I'll
did he-
pre-order.
Did he give the thoughts in English or German? Because I
In,
kind of
in English, and the word liability might have been involved.
No. Come on.
Bacon scented thermal paste.
Wait. So yeah. Are you saying those waifu cards that smell, are those also liability?
different
I
regulatory laws.
don't know if we want to get into that.
Look, I'm just gonna say too that in
Fin
fairness,
stack.
Romans in Germany, like the EU has so many more regulations than even we do, and we have more regulations than where the waifu cards come from. So
Yeah. Okay. Well.
Your strawberry scented thermal paste. You can fly out to his factory and probably make some yourself.
Ooh. Yeah. Okay.
after
I
you
dig
sign
it.
a
Yeah.
contract
Yeah.
that says that he's not legally
Yeah,
liable
yeah,
for
yeah.
anything
That's
that
fine.
happens.
Yeah. I mean, if you're stupid enough to eat thermal paste, then I guess I got your business.
That can be your slogan for
Yeah.
your thermal paste company.
Yeah, you
If you're
idiot.
stupid enough.
Let me get to a couple quick questions here from friends of the show. Ziv Zoolander asks, with tariffs and other supply constraints having an extended impact on GPU availability and pricing, do you think we'll see more interest in integrated graphics and APUs going forward?
That's a good question. I haven't thought about that. I feel like for laptops, you might. Laptop gaming demand. I feel like this is personally biased with how I would use a laptop to play games, but it seems like the graphics demand would be lower, so maybe you settle for integrated or something. But the demand will exist for professional use, and I think that's a problem for consumer use, where you want to play video games because you're competing with companies that make money. So I don't know, that's a hard I think it just comes down to, like, can you play the games you want to play on it? But it just feels bad to build a computer and leave the PCIe slots empty. Like something about it just looks wrong. When you look in the computer, you're like, something is permanently missing.
Adam has a solution for that.
I think I missed it.
Adam would put a sound card there.
Yeah, there you
Oh,
go. Sound
no.
card. Just populate every PCIe slot.
No,
with
man,
a sound card.
take your 1080 Ti off the wall and jam it in there. Get the
Yeah,
goat
there you
back
go.
in the
You
game.
get the physics.
Let it feel like it's not in retirement, right?
Yeah.
Like it's still got something to contribute. It has feelings
warming
too.
those slots.
Yeah. Friend of the show, Optimus or Optimus 11 says, does this mean that developers have to optimize games for older hardware since tariffs make no one buy anything new? No.
I got bad news for y'all.
Yeah. I think Will can speak to that the best.
I don't think people are not going to be supporting the hardware that's no longer supported by the vendors. So like your min spec 1080 Ti game is probably a thing of the past at this point.
Can you talk to them about that, Will?
Yeah.
I can
Like,
talk
you
to
can
them a
talk to
lot.
your
They're
developer
gonna,
friends.
well, so here's the thing. If you want games that run well on older hardware, play indie games, right? Because indie games are, for the most part, designed to run on everything. Blueprints, I was playing on my Lunar Lake laptop this weekend, and it's fantastic, right? It runs great. There's no performance problems. It looks good. Like it's indistinguishable from my 5090 with a giant 4K OLED and the whole thing. The if you want to play the big AAA game, whether it's Bungie's new extraction shooter or Indiana Jones or the new Doom game that's coming out later this year, you're probably not going to have a great experience on older hardware.
Lazy devs.
Wait,
Yeah, that's Adam's policy, not mine.
I'm kidding.
I know you
Joke.
have more. I know you have more questions, but can I insert just a
Please.
quick one? Like, of the group here, do we want to make a betting pool for how soon Brad starts talking about GeForce
GeForce Now? I think he already has.
I
hasn't
saw
he?
someone
Yeah.
post it.
Somebody posted it.
I saw that too, yeah.
Well, but
Sorry,
but I mean,
boss. Don't get mad.
as the demand for that stuff goes up and the demand for the GPU, because like GeForce Now.
Wait, is this the tipping point? Is this the tipping
No.
point?
Oh,
This is finally going to
no.
make
It
people
was
go
all
streaming?
Jensen's plan.
Yeah.
Oh,
He's like, you know
Jensen
what?
orchestrated all of it.
Oh,
Collapse
man.
the worldwide economy to make GeForce Now go. But like you're not going to get those slots. They're not going to sell spaces on GeForce Now because there won't be slack in the compute clusters because the AI stuff is still burning a lot of GPU compute cluster, and also you're going to be competing with everybody else who wasn't able to buy a video card because they now cost $4,000. Like it's not a real solution.
You know, Will,
Wait,
I like your flavor of pessimism.
Didn't they close signups?
I really like it.
Didn't they close signups too for a little bit?
For a little
Yeah,
bit.
they did.
Yeah.
Ooh,
I don't know if it's
boy.
back or not,
OpenAI
but-
was training new
Oh, that's why. Okay.
models at ChatGPT on their cluster.
Oh, that's right. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, I just bought a GPU yesterday.
Did you?
Oh, you don't have to brag about
I
it.
Wow.
know. I got
Humble
the
brag.
Rub
you get?
that in.
I got the
Rub that
hot
salt right in that wound.
5060 Ti 8 gig version.
Oh, no.
Oh,
Yeah.
That's what the
yeah.
kids crave.
It's coming tomorrow. Yeah. Well,
Are you reviewing it?
Yeah. Do you want to test it?
Sure.
Did you have one too?
No, I don't.
No. It's the hot card. It's the one everyone wants.
Are you and Will
I
gonna play?
missed that.
Are you and Will gonna play Fortnite on it?
Yeah.
Probably, yeah. Look, Adam yelled at me because I went to the electronics flea market here a couple of weeks ago.
What?
And I didn't buy a 1080 Ti. They had 1080 Ti's new in box, still sealed.
Two
and
of
I
them.
didn't buy it for
Sealed?
$200. Yeah.
$200 for a 1080
Wait,
Ti.
what?
Okay,
I
hold
know.
on.
Sealed in
Sealed?
box.
Hold on though. I want everyone to remember
Founders
that
edition, too.
that vacuum sealing or like like one of those heat guns. Like you can like seal boxes on your own.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. This had the
Just before you get too excited.
It had the factory tape. It was not in shrink wrap. It had the tamper-proof tape on the seal.
For audio listeners, Adam is holding a big L up to the TV screen over a certain person's
okay,
forehead
man.
right now, which might be against our HR policies, and it's on video.
I'm targeted. I'm feeling very targeted.
He was just trying to catch it on. He was trying to catch me, but he missed it on. Will,
Yeah.
so
Oh,
Yeah.
man.
Tell that
Yeah.
to HR.
All right. Well, yeah. Okay. No, we need to get out of here.
Wait, I have one.
Oh,
for,
you've
for
got
Steve.
a question.
So
For Steve.
from the show, Liquid R over on Discord says, "What edition of D&D and class does Steve play?"
Ooh.
Oh, that's a good
When
one.
we had switched to a small system called Savage Worlds after D&D, but I was on D&D 3.5 for the longest time.
Nerd.
Never really made the full switch over to fourth. And then I went to Savage Worlds, which is like a really cool small system if people want to check it out. But yeah, D&D was no longer nerdy enough for me. I needed to exclude myself from even more circles. So that way I
Wow,
can shove
shots.
I play Savage Worlds
Actually.
and just further
fired.
isolate myself.
Dude, I actually really would love to see some kind of like charity stream where we just get a bunch of the tech tubers together and just play a one
I'd do
shot.
it.
That'd be fun.
Yeah.
Set it up, Adam.
Yeah, let's do it. Yeah. No,
D&D on the
I've
full
got
nerd.
stuff to talk about. Yeah, for sure. Let's wrap it up there. So check back next week for your fix of PC Talk here on the Full Nerd. To subscribe to us on the go. We're available anywhere you can get podcasts. We got Apple Podcasts, Pocket Casts, Spotify, Deezer, all the fun ones. We're there. And if we aren't, leave a message and we'll get us on whatever hot new
Instantly.
platform that you're wanting to subscribe to. But I want to thank Steve for coming on the show, taking the time out to hang with us schlubs. You know, Steve's an important man doing important things.
Definitely not.
Where can people go to see your content, Steve?
GamersNexus or
Wait, is that spelled with 2 words or 1 word?
Well, technically, it's one word, but I haven't adjusted it on YouTube because I'm terrified of changing it again on YouTube.
Yeah.
Very fair.
Hey, what kind of things can people look forward to? Dyson reviews?
Yeah,
What do you
it's
got
actually
coming
the
out?
top of my list.
Okay.
Yeah, we're starting. I sent a message to the guys. They're starting the anechoic chamber
Good.
testing right
Just-
now.
Yeah. Just turn it
Yeah.
on. Get it.
Why,
Yeah,
I mean, we know you have a Dyson hairdryer in your office there. That's got to be part of the routine, right?
Come
that's
on.
going to be a future sponsorship. I'm not supposed
Yeah.
to talk about that.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, okay. Yeah. All right. Well, and thank you again for your video. Awesome stuff. I linked to it in the description. Go watch it if you haven't already. I'm going to assume people have. My hope is that it educates and informs a lot of people. So hopefully this discussion as well. And yeah, I mean, if there's more to dig into, which I think there
We'll do
is,
it, yeah.
get into it for sure. I appreciate it. I also appreciate Elena for coming into the studio physically. Yeah.
Yeah, this is new. It's been maybe months. Before we go,
Yes.
Steve, somebody suggested GamersNexus as a channel, and I
yeah,
just want to
yeah.
say
Mhm.
that if you had like a channel just dedicated to snowflake shorts, I would be the highlight of my day.
I
100%.
ask me about it next time out there because I've had ideas.
Your cat's the best.
Well, yeah, Lindsay has always been like, why don't you have our cat like review the tech? Just like, you
I
know,
don't even need a review.
does it like to lay on
wanna
it?
see
How
her
hot is it?
just like going about her day,
Yeah.
like
Doing stuff.
just
yeah.
doing stuff.
just living life. Yeah, Snowflake.
Cat
I would
around.
I would pay extra for that I would pay the higher level Patreon tier for
Oh,
that
wow.
for sure. Yeah.
Oh,
Snowflake.
okay. I'll start it right
Yeah.
now.
You got my money, Steve. Also, Will, thanks for being in the box. I appreciate it.
Look, it's exciting to be here. I get to sit in my office. I'm going to go make a sandwich here in a minute. It's it's a very different day for
Turn
me.
your lights off. Show people what it looks like when you're usually not streaming. Yeah,
This is how
that's usually just.
Is this how you game?
Full
You're just like in the
silhouetted.
dark.
No, if I'm
Intensely.
gaming, it's like this.
Oh, that's creepy. That's creepy right there.
Yeah.
Like for audio listeners, you just see Will's
when he
eyes.
punches in. Yeah, there you go.
Is that how you murder people? Yikes.
That's how I do click on the heads. Yeah. That's
Oh,
what I do.
boy.
Nerd.
Oh, you made me turn the game frame off.
Yeah. Whoops. And yeah, thanks Willis for controlling verticals horizontals. Glad to have you back. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Go, pet your neighborhood snowflake because she's cute. So thanks everybody. Let's get out of here. We will catch you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
That song bangs.
I didn't realize that you don't see us dancing at the end of the show. That
No one needs to see that.
Yeah, you
up
don't
there.
want to see that.
No one needs to see
It's the
that.
best part of the show. I always put real effort into that. I'm
Yeah,
gonna
you
just
do.
half-ass it now.
Yeah. Beep.